Hi, this is Carl from Linguagenesis, and what I want to do for the next 10 minutes or so, and it may take even longer, maybe I need to actually put this into a two-part video, is to talk about the psychology of the late hyperpolyglot Michel Thomas. Now, many of you out there who are learning either one modern foreign language or multiple modern foreign languages will have undoubtedly heard of the name of Michel Thomas. And just to give you a little bit of background information first of all, he was born in Poland in February of 1914, served in the French resistance of the Second World War, and then in the immediate post-war era moved to the United States, where in 1947, and I think it was in Los Angeles, he founded his first institute for modern foreign language learning, which was initially called the Polyglot Institute. However, as most people around that time were unfamiliar with the definition of the word polyglot, Michel Thomas did ultimately decide to change the name to something different to make it more comprehensible, although I can't quite remember what that name was exactly. Now, many of my own students, and even those people who are independent learners whom I've not necessarily taught, but who I know to be learning a modern foreign language, have actually come up to me and commented on the fact that they've been out to buy a CD course by Michel Thomas in whichever language it is they're studying, usually either German or Spanish, and remarked on just how effective they found the approach to be, how they've managed as a result to build up their vocabulary nice and swiftly, how they've gained confidence as far as linguistic acquisition is concerned and being able to speak the language. And one question which keeps cropping up again and again from students is, why is this approach so effective? What is it that makes it so different from other techniques which are used in language education, for example in mainstream education and also in further education in night schools and in evening classes? And obviously, as this is a question which has been posed to me, obviously I have to try as best as I can to provide an answer to it. But what I think we need to bear in mind is that there are possible answers to this question, and one of the most important things to bear in mind first of all is that in order to gain an understanding of Michel Thomas, what we need to do is to delve into history, look back to 1947 and ask ourselves, for example, if we consult members of the third generation, for example our grandparents, and we ask them how did they find language learning in their schooling years to be, did they find it interesting or did they find it boring? I think the general consensus would be that they found it extremely tiresome, extremely tedious, and that they perhaps went into a classroom with their fellow classmates and that they were made to sit down in an orderly manner, listen to the teacher, stood up at the front of the class reeling off the verb tables, having put up a verb table on the board with the separate verb conjugations, asked one person to stand up in front of the rest of the class and repeat these, and that it was simply a case for many old school language teachers that pupils would simply be expected to remember the verbs, remember the vocabulary, and everything would have been taken as knowledge, and that if any student wasn't able to recall any of the vocabulary which had been studied in a previous class, then this could ultimately lead to that person being embarrassed by the teacher in front of his or her classmates. And therefore, I think as a result of that, many people would have been injected with feelings of despondency, feelings of negativity where language learning is concerned. But when we take a look at Michel Thomas in 1947 and we think about the fact that this was a man who had founded a language learning institute and that by that time he'd already got together feelings about what constituted essential and effective modern foreign language learning, naturalized linguistic acquisition, I think we need to give him a great deal of credit for having been so different to the majority of language teachers, especially in mainstream education at that time. Now, if we consider the Michel Thomas CD courses, which have been published by the company Hodder and Stoughton, and which are available in many different modern foreign languages, including, for example, German, Spanish, French, and Italian, and we give consideration to the fact that Michel Thomas introduces these courses with what are known as ground rules, and we take into consideration what these ground rules actually constitute, then we can see from the outset that Michel Thomas does indeed have a very sensible and acute awareness of the psychology which leads to naturalized and effective linguistic acquisition. One of those ground rules is the fact that we need to be relaxed, and the other ground rule is that we needn't guess, we needn't do any homework. And I think these ground rules are extremely important to bear in mind, because if we take, for example, into consideration the first ground rule, which is the fact that students must be relaxed, obviously we need to be relaxed, because if we're uptight about modern foreign language learning and we think about, for example, how good a non-native speaker of English, how good their English is in comparison to how a native speaker of English would be in a modern foreign language, then we might be inclined to think, well, because everybody else in the world can speak English, why should we bother learning a modern foreign language in the first place? I think feelings such as this, I think also if we believe from the outset, and this is a misconception, if we believe from the outset that we won't be able to succeed because language learning in the United Kingdom has generally been a failure, which arguably it has, and many people take a dislike to modern foreign language learning even today, I think that this is something which is not to be wished for, and that we need, through listening to Michel Thomas's advice as far as relaxation techniques are concerned, to take on board his advice. And then as far as the second ground rule is concerned, which is the fact that we shouldn't be guessing any of the words, again, whereas English is concerned, when we're brought up to learn a modern foreign language, we're simply absorbing the words, we needn't guess the words. And similarly, where the learning of a modern foreign language is concerned, where translation is concerned, because this is evidently what we're doing when we're listening to the Michel Thomas courses, what we're doing is we're translating from one language into the other. But the more we guess and the more we get it wrong, then arguably this can potentially lead to the belief that if we guess and we get things wrong, then we're never ever going to be able to put a sentence together. If similarly we become overly concerned with grammatical accuracy, and we think that, for example, there's always too much to remember, and therefore this is why I'm always hesitant about putting a sentence together, stumbling word upon word, because I know, or I'm nearly 100% sure that I'm going to get the next word wrong. Again, these are feelings which we need to evade almost completely, because otherwise we're not going to be able to achieve that goal which Michel Thomas wants us to achieve. In other words, naturalized forms of linguistic acquisition. Let language come naturally to you. Repeat. Don't try to remember, because even when we're growing up as children learning our mother tongue, it's done naturally. We're not aware of the fact that we're actually learning the language, because in a way we're not really doing that. We're simply able to absorb, we're simply able to regurgitate through listening to the spoken language. And in later years, when we come to learn a modern foreign language, more often than not we think to ourselves, well, we're being taught the grammar, but when we were growing up as children in English we never did the grammar, so why do we actually need to learn it now? What benefits is it going to bring to us? This is arguably what Michel Thomas is trying to do. He's trying to get people from thinking that the initial point of departure where language learning is concerned is to look into the grammatical essence of a modern foreign language. This is arguably achieved, but it comes on a secondary plane. The primary plane, and the one which is given priority, is the intake of vocabulary and the ability to put words together to make up grammatically accurate sentences. But as I say, the grammar itself is actually introduced on a secondary plane and is not the initial point of departure. Now I'm going to leave that there, but what I will do is, as I said at the beginning of this particular video, I will record maybe one or two more parts to conclude this video, and as each subsequent part is released, what I will do is to just give a brief overview and a conclusion, well, a summary of what I was talking about in the first part, and then continue my discussion.